All right, everybody. Welcome back to the Big Douglas Show. We're doing season is over now for us. We'll do a recap. We'll do a little look at the game, and we'll probably do a lot of looking ahead. And to do that, brought in two of my favorites from the Trapper Dive Podcast. Maul Forrest is with us. Maul, what's happening?
Ain't much, Doug. Appreciate you having me, man. It's been a little minute since we talked.
It hasn't been too long. And one of my
Yeah.
best friends here on the interwebs, George Carmi from Full Press Commanders is with us. George, what's happening, man?
What's up, brother? How you doing, man? Happy to be here.
I am. And fellas, in what was the inaugural Commanders season, only they could find a way to go 500 in an 18-game season. So there they go with 17 that they play, I suppose. So
Some things just don't change.
That to me sums it all up
Watch
perfectly, putting a bow on it, going 500. Let's start with you, George. As you look back, we'll get to the game in a little bit. When we look back on the season, what will you remember this season for?
the offensive line, man. I think there's some poor construction going into the season. Honestly, it was kind of a roller coaster ride. We talked about it offline before we got on here. In retrospect, it's kind of a missed opportunity. Obviously we thought that we could potentially go to the playoffs. Sitting there about a month ago, sitting at the 6th seed, it was almost like unimaginable that we'd lose all three of these games, tie in 2-3 games going into this whole little month and missing out on the playoffs. The whole year talked about progress and taking a step forward. And, now we're finally going to show who we truly are. We're leaving this year with a whole bunch of questions as opposed to a bunch of answers. And that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I wish, we're going into the offseason looking at a quarterback. What are we going to do there? Is Ron Rivera the coach of the future? There's a bunch of missed opportunities. And I think, unfortunately, the offensive line kind of brought us all down. So I think that lack of offense is going to plague us going into next year. So missed opportunities is the way I take away.
For me, missed opportunity is a good one. I guess like miscalculation would be like one word to describe it as well. George, you did a good job of kind of highlighting the offensive line side. And then there's also like an evaluation that goes to the quarterback and just from the actual evaluating of the evaluator. So Ron Rivera and company, given their situation in Washington and understanding that, year 3 was big for them, understanding that Carson Wentz is going to be the guy that they choose to hitch their quote unquote short-term future. Let's put it that way. Their short-term future too. And George, you spoke on the offensive line. We don't have to go that far into it any further on my side, but then you sit here and think that you have the pieces or believe that you have the pieces to insulate Carson Wentz. And that's the big thing, not having an offensive line to really help him out. Then you point to the coordinator. You're hoping that you have a coordinator who can consistently deliver a product or a scheme or a game plan that helps Carson Wentz eliminate the mental errors that he's known to doing. And you don't really complete. You're not successful in that aspect too. And then you get to the quarterback himself. Like nothing has changed from this year to his past 2 or 3 seasons in what originally got him sent to Indianapolis. Nothing changed there. And then you have essentially a guy in Ron Rivera who is convinced that he is the guy who can quote unquote fix Carson Wentz. And ultimately the price that you pay to acquire him is just a complete miscalculation of your strengths as an evaluator, but also a miscalculation of what you thought that Carson Wentz can do. And now everybody is sitting here wondering, is he capable of finding quarterback one in the offseason unless one has been gifted to him after, yesterday's game?
We'll circle back to some of all of that stuff in a minute, but Anthony's got a great point. It was a victory yesterday for those of you that like winning. It was a not so good day for those of you that are more interested in team building. Now, they got lucky yesterday, as I understand it. There was a point in the week where they could have been as high as 10 and as low as 17. what with some of the other losing that went on Sunday, it sounds like they could have never gotten higher than 14. They ended up at 16. So I will take those two places for the win that we got yesterday. Well, it was a goofy game yesterday. I was trying to figure out the word to describe yesterday's game. I mean, all the turnovers, the double interception, if you will, for Fuller. It was a goofy game. And Sam Howell, to his credit, looked the part. The game didn't look too big for him. He gets credit for that. I liked it, the fact that he had the interception in the end zone, a little turmoil to see how he bounced back. It didn't look like that phased him too much at all. I understood what he was trying to do with that ball. He had Cam Sims streaking down the back of the end zone, trying to catch the fade. Made good sense. He just didn't see the guys dropping back into coverage. What did you guys see? Maul, we'll start with you. What did you see? And was there anything yesterday that you mentioned where they gifted one? It wouldn't have been gifted because, in fairness, they drafted him. But was there anything that he could have actually done yesterday? Did he do it yesterday to keep you from trying to find quarterback one in the offseason?
To keep, I mean, I'll put it this way. I think that what Sam Howell did on Sunday, essentially at the very least, put him in the conversation to compete for the starting spot. I think that's the bare minimum. There shouldn't be any conversation unless you can find a top 10 prospect or somebody in the first round that you are heavily invested in from a draft pick standpoint, or you have like an absurd offseason where you acquire one of the undoubted elite quarterbacks, which I doubt is going to happen. I'm just saying if that is what the conversation is, then Sam Howell is definitely a quarterback after his performance on Sunday, where you're sitting here saying, yeah, we need to consider him in terms of if he can start for 2023. And I think even to expand that conversation, like what realistic options can you really go off of in the free agency pool? Jimmy Garoppolo's out there. And for all of the concerns about who Jimmy G is, I think, and while I don't sit here and say, he may be like we may be on his short-term list, I think that this is a team that's already tailor built for a veteran quarterback to come in. Like, as opposed to like the last 2 years, I think this is probably the best team to do it with. But point being, if you want to really go and build your own and develop your own guys, there is no veterans out there that's strong enough to warrant bringing them in and saying you are the bona fide starter, unless it's that Jimmy G mode. But I would prefer just going with the rookie or going with your second year player or drafting somebody, because at the end of the day, these are guys that you can stick around for a few years. And if Ron Rivera somehow survives the next couple of days and he survives 2023 season, then, he has somebody who he can hitch his wagon to it, and he'll have some fan support behind that quarterback as well. So I see no reason why after the game against the Dallas Cowboys, especially a divisional rival at that, and looking as good as he did when people were concerned that this is a guy who may falter under this offensive line, who may not be prepared, who may not be in a situation that he can overcome all of the pressures that Dallas is going to send him because they have to try and play for that number 1 seed or the division title. He looked fine. You need to consider him. So that's kind of where I'm at with it.
And it's important to note, I think, that Dallas played the worst game. I think the second worst game statistically for Dak Prescott. The defense was incredible.
His career, it was awful.
Yeah, it was. And important to note that they were playing. They did not mail that one in. They did not rest the starters, which I figured they certainly would in the second half. So credit to the whole team. That was a win worth having, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? There are some that are not. If they'd just thrown that one away, it would have been a lot harder to be excited about Sam Howell. I also wish there had been some way where things would have worked so that Howell would have played, say, 3 games. Would have been nice to see defensive coordinators actually game plan for him specifically. I think you'd have gotten a much better idea of who Sam Howell really was. George, what do you think the quarterback room looks like next year?
Yes, that's a great
way
question.
too early prediction on what the quarterback room looks like for next year.
I love it. So just to kind of touch on both parts, right? So I like what Jamal said. Like Sam Howell is encouraging. What he did yesterday was an encouraging performance. You want him to do well. You want him to thrive. He scored 2 touchdowns, one on the ground, one in the air. He proved at the moment wasn't too big for him. Do I automatically want to peg him as QB1? Absolutely not, right? You only have a 1-game sample size. You don't really know where he's going to be big picture. You don't really know what happens if a defensive coordinator, plans against him. Jamal's smart, man. That's why we all follow him on Twitter. I like Jimmy Garoppolo as well. I think sorry to embarrass you, Jamal. I think Jimmy Garoppolo is a potential good option to kind of plug and play into our team. However, this is my thing, right? So this is my vision, and I know it's going to be polarizing. Taylor Heinecke, man. I don't know if I love the guy, but I think he does offer a veteran presence. I think he does offer a pretty high floor. He offers you 500 ball as a backup, right? So when I kind of reflect on this, I'm like, what would be the benefit of bringing in another veteran when you already have one potentially coming back to your team? If it's a significant improvement, like, hey, Lamar Jackson's on the trade market. Oh, maybe Jimmy Garoppolo is cheap. Something like that, you could potentially bring him in. But for me, I think I'm kind of intrigued right now. We'll see how the whole draft process goes. But, having Howell, having Heinecke come back at a pretty cheap deal, and then taking another risk at a potential rookie in the draft, right? So, another one, right? Just kind of keep on reloading and throwing another dart on the table. The reason why I think that is basically Howell's cheap. He's on a rookie contract. You can potentially get Heinecke for maybe $10 million or less, right? And you get another rookie in the mix. Those are basically 3 potential upside quarterbacks that you have for a very cheap rate, right? So it's kind of like roster construction-wise, it's a smart decision to do it. And, we know that it's kind of a lame duck year in 2023, potentially with a new owner, Ron Rivera. So it's really smart to have waste assets in regard to trade, draft picks or big money on like a David, Carr from the Raiders. I don't know if I want to go that route, right? So I think it's having a rookie in, having more potential for upside, but keeping the costs low is probably a smart move going into next year, at least in my opinion.
And Christopher here made a great point. I put it up earlier. I'll put it back again here now. We were talking about the deficiencies of the offensive line. There is nothing that helps out a porous offensive line than a guy that can move around a little bit. And he showed you what he could do. I mean, to me yesterday, how it looked like a mix of what you wanted from Wentz and what, what Heinecke you wish he could be, quite frankly. I'm with you on Heinecke, George. I've been stated, I think that his presence looms large for a rookie quarterback, and people want to poo-poo that as like, well, if that's the case, then the other guy ain't worth having if he's that fragile. Well, no, not necessarily. Some guys just get into the locker room and become one of those guys. To me, that's not the big question with Heinecke. The big question is, what will he cost? Now, his interview, right, on the way out, and I forget who got the quote on this one, so sorry I can't, give credit. But basically he said, I kind of like the idea of coming back here. I like being a part of this organization. The organization was good to me. Being a backup quarterback isn't the worst thing in the world. And he's right. The best job in the world may be the backup quarterback. Problem is, I'm not paying him upwards of $18 million a year. I'm not paying him $15 million a year. Frankly, I'm not paying him $12 million a year, probably. That being said, over 65, I don't know what the number will end up being. On Wednesday, before this week started, it was 65 different starting quarterbacks will have played this season. Largest number since the merger, which just is a reflection of how important that particular position is. So if the number's right and he wants to be here, I don't see his presence being a problem. Jamal, where do you kind of stand on what we'll call the Heinecke situation?
I mean, I personally, I wouldn't mind him coming back, but I think the thing that really is a hiccup is a couple things that you already talked to. First off, the money. If you think about it, so quarterbacks is tricky because sometimes, and I'm not saying this as a matter of fact, this is my opinion. Sometimes I think evaluators can go off of so many different things that for them trumps like actual skill set. Like they can be a winner and be, I'm putting a number out there, be 20, 27 and 13 as a starter, but don't look at, how they're getting the wins or don't fully look into how they're getting the wins or fully look into, what exactly is this player doing in their wins? What exactly is this player doing when they're losing? How are they losing? Is he a top reason for why they're losing? Can he get them back in games? And how does he get them back in games? If he does. And for Heinecke, I think evaluators are going to fall into that trap to some degree. I'm not going to sit here and say that they're going to sit here and think that he's some all-world elite talent. But I say that to say, in free agency, you always get somebody that overpays, and somebody who's willing to pay a Taylor Heinecke is probably going to be somebody with some solid pockets to pay a backup quarterback. And like, oh, by the way, we may give you that opportunity for a chance to compete. We can't guarantee you right now, but we can tell you, I mean, we can't guarantee that you'll start day one, but we can tell you whoever we do pick, if we do pick somebody, you'll have that opportunity to start as quarterback one. Here's that money. We'll show you that good faith. Come on and join us. And Taylor may take that option. So when you look at the situation here in Washington, if we're thinking about the idea of bringing in a rookie quarterback or continuing on with Sam Howell, and even doing all three, Sam Howell and Taylor and a rookie, I don't think Taylor fits in none of those equations because it's going to cost too much to keep Taylor here and say, we need you to back up such and such. Granted, to your point, Doug, I remember the conversation too. And part of his conversation was that he doesn't mind, he embraces the backup role. So that is the one kind of thing that you don't really hear from quarterbacks these days is understanding that there is somebody who is willingly open to the idea of coming back here as a backup. And I think that's the only thing that I can account for, in that maybe he does make a fair deal for Washington as long as he's paid accordingly, but like a fair deal. Like I'm not going to hit you over the head with these type of details. Maybe he does stay in Washington, and maybe that's the one part I can't see. But if I'm looking at it from a perspective of a person who hasn't made nothing in the NFL to this point, and you went 5-3-1 as a starter, and evaluators are going to look at that record and say that you were the reason why that Washington had a chance in making the playoffs, I see him going somewhere else.
Now, a guy that is not worried about giving Washington a discount, one of my favorites, Daron Payne, going to get paid this offseason.
Sure.
All of it, this will be one of the most interesting off seasons that we'll have all been a part of, simply because of the ownership situation, right? I mean, I think at this point, it's if you follow the team close enough, if you follow the content creators here, you know, it's kind of easy to see that if the new owner doesn't come in until the end of March, early April, which is what it seems like, most of the offseason has been done and crafted by then. And you're only, you know, the beginning of April, the draft is a couple of weeks away. So it just doesn't make a whole ton of sense. It'll be interesting to see how they allocate their resources. I personally would look long and hard at figuring out a way to bring Daron Payne back. I would not say that before the season started. I thought for sure he'd be gone. What we cannot do, what I just do not want to see, is the man walk out the door for the third round comp pick. You cannot let guys this good get out the building. And personally, Montez Sweat's coming up. And listen, I got berated on Twitter for saying I'd rather pay Payne than Sweat if I could only choose one. I think people didn't get the only choose one part. Montez was fantastic this year, and I'd love to have him back. Something about Montez, to me, he's not nearly as aggressive as I'd like him to be. That's my only complaint with Montez. I don't know that he's got like that extra I hate you mode. He seems like a nice guy that's good at rushing the passer. That's why I think I'd pay Payne or franchise tag him. I just can't see a scenario where you let him walk out the door. George, I think I know where you stood before the season started. Where do you stand now?
It was interesting going in before the season because I was kind of going back and forth. Drafting Phil Mathis in the second round, you kind of like, all right, maybe there's a potential replacement for Daron Payne. And, you know, we actually have great depth now with Ridgeway actually coming about as well.
That's fantastic.
I think Daron Payne, man, honestly, I think he is our top priority to re-sign. Like that's where I'm at right now. I think we have to retain him, whether it's a long-term deal, whether it's a franchise tag. I don't think you let him walk away. It's funny. I guess my whole rationale with defensive tackles is I've always felt them to be like replaceable. But when you are a special defensive tackle, it's when you become a pass disruptor, right? When you can actually pursue the quarterback and disrupt the offensive line. Like that's why Aaron Donald's special. And with Deron Payne having 11.5 sacks now, I'm not saying they're anywhere in the same realm, but the fact that Deron Payne has 11.5 sacks and, Jonathan Allen 2 years in a row having a Pro Bowl, career now so far, I think they work well in tandem, and you can't break that up. I love Logan Paul.
And Deron's only 25.
He's only 25 too. Yeah, I mean, we're hitting him at the prime of his career. So this 25, probably a 3-year contract, 25 to 28 or something like that. That's the prime of his career, and you want him here in DC. And I think you alluded to something, Doug. Like edge rushers are more important when it comes to roster construct, right? Chase Young, Montez Sweat. But so far, I think the tandem of Payne and Allen are probably more important to our team than Sweat and Young right now. Like, I think they have higher upside edge guys. You can't break them up. And as we saw with the Browns game, when Allen went down with the hyperextended knee, Nick Chubb started getting these 7 yards per carry in the second half, really starting to elevate and take it to the next level. So I think we're not necessarily like, obviously we have to do money allocation, but at the same time, you have to keep your best players, right? And I think keeping them together, that's a good building block, especially with Forrest and Curl kind of coming of age in the back end. Like, our defense is intact. So, if we can kind of find a way to keep our best players, and maybe – and that also goes to the rookie quarterback. That's why I kind of want to keep it cheaper, because I think you can also build that longer team, long-term respect for larger windows. So keep Deron Payne 100%.
I think I'll say Deron, I'm cool with him being here, but like I say like around I'm my strength is like 80%, 70%. And the reason why I say that is like I'm okay with moving on from a defensive tackle. I'm okay with moving on from Deron Payne, especially if a price point gets too high, and odds are it's going to get real high in free agency. The way to counter that is obviously just franchising them, and that's the route that I would prefer. And granted, there is a way. I mean, if you just want to say F it and give him the money like right now and bring your strongest offer to the table before he hits that market and sees what else, go for it. If he signs the deal, cool. Even if you do it in free agency and it makes sense for your team, cool. I think those are the ripple effects is something similar to what they did when they traded for Carson. But this time you're talking about losing Montez Sweat next year. You're not going to keep him. You can franchise him, right? For a season or two, depending on how long you need him, but you're not going to keep him long term. And then there's going to be some other positions that we're probably not thinking about. Maybe even Cole Holcomb. I don't think you'll be able to get Cole Holcomb for like bottom of the barrel money, but you can probably get him at like a mid-tier rate. I don't know what those numbers look like. I'm just talking about it right now. But
it looks like about 10, Maul.
10?
Like the upper echelon guys are getting like 15, 16, 17. So I would think a Holcomb's around 10.
Are y'all cool with Holcomb at 10, assuming that Deron Payne is re-signed? Like, do you keep Holcomb around? Is he that big of a piece? I'm serious asking. Is he big of a piece where you're like, all right, we're gonna pay him that 10 mil?
Did you notice the games he didn't play in?
Yeah, they still look all right. John Bostic. Hey, people ain't gonna hear, don't want to hear it, but John Bostic did a solid job filling in. The issue is when they align him up with a receiver and he has no choice but to check him. It's not gonna look.
I agree.
It's not gonna look good. But that's kind of where I'm at. That defensive line, like you got to pay somebody, and it's either going to be eventually going to be Chase Young, right?
Yeah.
But then it's either going to be Payne or Sweat, and which one is the guy that you trust more? Sweat is a guy where he had a good year this year, but if you're talking about like what he looked like on the edge, winning quickly, being able to dominate offensive tackles who are just as good as his level or better. He's a little inconsistent there. If you're talking about saying you hope that he faces some sorry left tackles throughout the course of a season, then you don't have anything to worry about. He is really good in terms of like a looper or a person who plays like the line games. He's the athletic guy who's quick enough to exploit those holes in the offensive line. But if you're talking about like, is his value being able to beat that left tackle one-on-one and quickly get to the quarterback? I guarantee you haven't seen that like consistently. And I'm not bashing him. I'm saying this is kind of evaluation. When you look at Deron Payne, this is the year where he broke out. He was able to do that. He was able to win consistently. He was able to win quickly against interior offensive linemen as a 3-tech or anything, being able to win in that regard. And he's winning with pass rush moves and things like that. And I'm not saying Montez Sweat didn't do it. It's more so how did he do it and against who? And that's kind of where my issues come in with Sweat. So it's like these are the things that they're going to think about too. And I'm cool with going with Payne. That's why I say like 80, 70%, like around that range for me. But the ripple effect is more so probably losing Montez Sweat, and I'm okay with that as well.
And for Payne, it's possible to give him, a 4-year deal with the first 3 guaranteed, give him a big ass signing bonus up front, and move the money around to where he's getting 22 average annual value, but you're paying him, whatever it is as you disperse the money around. So just this notion that Payne's going to cost $22 million a year, which I think is probably at least the number. Because I think the tag is 18, which is why I keep saying I think more than likely it's the tag.
But I think it's skewed though, Doug. Sorry to interrupt you. I think it's skewed. I don't have it right in front of me. I think like most of the defensive tackles are getting like 16 and 17, and then Aaron Donald's getting like 23. I think that's why that.
Well, Jonathan Allen signed his deal for 18, right? 18. Jonathan Allen is
17 a year. Something around that, yeah. So yeah, probably about 20. That's what I assume. Yeah.
And when you talk about teams that have, like in Atlanta, that has a ton of money to throw around, that's why I think if you're giving them the we want you deal, it's probably upwards of 21, 22, and he resets the market, which seems crazy. But as that number keeps going up, probably, as they always say, today's overpay is tomorrow's value. Maul, you look like you had something.
Yeah, no, I was just laughing. I was like, it's crazy how both Daron Payne is in for a very solid payday, but then also John Allen arguably already outplayed his contract. Like it's already happening.
That's a good thing, right? That's a good thing.
And there's a world.
It may be a good thing, like from our eye, George, but internally,
that's true.
He may be looking at that, and I'm not saying it's a negative thing. I'm just saying he may be like,
I
got to get paid again. Like, come on, look at these numbers. I'm about to get an All-Pro bid. I got to get paid again. So I don't know.
And the crazy thing is, I believe this wholeheartedly. I think Payne's ceiling is higher than John's.
John's better, man. I think John's better overall, but I don't know, upside, I don't know. We'll see.
I was on that boat for a while, Doug, and then I changed my tune after I saw John Allen play last year and then back it up this year. Yeah, and that so to what you're saying, I understand it. I just changed my tune. I was in that boat, and now I'm like, I get it, but I think John Allen is that guy.
John is that guy, and he's the better player right now. I still see a world where Payne is just now putting it together with 11.5, and next year could be a 13 guy, right? Like I think he's just now, again, 25 years old. I think he's just now starting to figure some of this stuff out. Again, John Allen today is the better player. I'm not suggesting that he's not, but I think there is a world where Payne is the better player, and we'll show that. It's a lot of money to hand out to D tackles. I'll just say that. We were talking about quarterbacks earlier. I want to get back to it just for a second. Bears got the number 1 pick overall, which in turn got Lovey fired yesterday. McNair looks so upset on the sideline, which is one of those crazy things, right, where they're trying to win and it's not good for the organization. You could see he was visually upset on the sideline if they didn't get that win. I feel bad for Lovey, what he's supposed to do. But with the number 1 pick, I mean, you either move on for Fields, which I don't think I would do personally. I liked Fields. I wanted to trade for him 2 or 3 years ago, whenever it was. But there will be options for quarterback there. Now, again, it's hard to know how much leeway this group's going to get in the offseason. But Jamal, are you interested in either one of those options? Either Fields, which probably comes, let's say, 1 first-round pick, or the 3, I'm assuming you'd have to get up, particularly now where they're at now, all the way up to number 1. For me, Bryce Young is the number 1 pick in the draft, and I think that his talent is staff changeable, if you will. I'm just trying to figure out the right word, but I guess what I'm saying is, like Brendan Darr told me the other day, like, I don't want this group picking for the next group. I guess what I'm getting at is I think I like Bryce Young enough personally that I think any group that comes in, whether it's this year or next year, will be happy to have Bryce Young as QB1. George, where do you stand on those possibilities?
So I think if you're the Bears, you have to explore all options, right? We'll start off with there. Like, you can't just kind of rest your laurels on Justin Fields. Like, I like Fields a lot, and I think he's dynamic and he can scramble and he can run. But there has been times where his evolution as a passer really hasn't hit that next level yet. So that's definitely something to kind of consider. But at the same time, if you trade back potentially at 3 first-round picks as the Bears, getting that draft haul is very important. So definitely weigh all your options. For the Commanders, I don't want to go chasing the number 1 overall pick. I think that's too much investment. I think you're going to be spending way too much and kind of mortgaging your future on a rookie quarterback. You don't really know what's going to happen. Potentially, if we were at the 10th spot, it might maybe a little bit more intriguing, but I just don't. The way Howell performed yesterday, I don't think it's going to be. I'm not saying Howell is a QB1 off the break, but it's like he was intriguing enough to kind of consider it and kind of invest it where you don't want to push in all the eggs. And we also just talked about all the potential signings that we have, right? If we're spending all this money on Deron Payne and potentially Chase Young and potentially Montez Sweat, and all of our salary cap's going to be kind of tied up in those guys, you need the draft capital to supplement them and build up your team. You can't give all those away. So I don't want to go QB chasing. Justin Fields maybe at a slighter, cheaper price, but at the same time, if anything, I guess it's kind of silly and it's kind of a pipe dream for us in DC. The only time I'd ever expend multiple first-round picks would be on Lamar Jackson if he could potentially become available. But I don't see that happening. I think he's going to retain. He's going to get an exclusive franchise tag in Baltimore and stay there. So I guess to answer your question, I don't want to go QB chasing. I'd rather build the team from the right way. Hopefully that we do the thing the right way. We get the right GM. We kind of have the right coach in 2024, and we're putting it that direction, and not push the eggs in this year. Like I know it's enticing and it's good sports talk, but it's not something that I would do.
I'm in the same boat as you, George. I'm not making no moves for the first or second pick. I think the biggest thing overall when you have this type of conversation is thinking about the same way that you think about free agency, like or off-season free agency, not necessarily literally, like what trades are you going to make in the off-season that is going to instantly or undoubtedly make your team a Super Bowl contender. It's only 4 that Lamar Jackson, in theory, Aaron Rodgers. I'm not saying anything in terms of him going anywhere, but like in theory, those are the guys. And even still, like Lamar may end up being a free agent, so you may not have to trade for him. I doubt it happens like that, but that's my point. Like those are assets that you have to give up for a rookie quarterback. And sure, that obviously in turn tells people that you are all in. But at this point, I need Washington to get out of the trap. Like there's a reason why things are labeled as traps. Sometimes it's a never-ending cycle. Sometimes you always find yourself back in the same wheelhouse that continues on spinning the way in which you were trying to get away from. And for Washington, that one of their traps is falling in love with eye candy and falling in love with the idea that you can put somebody else's quarterback in your system, somebody else's meaning somebody else who drafted him, somebody else who traded for him, like all of these other things, and you can make them work here. Find your guy, find the traits that you need in a quarterback to be successful and go from there. And that's why I like the idea of Sam Howell. Like if he was to start in 2023, you can go ahead and bolster up your offensive line in free agency. You can spend X amount of money in free agency to spend as much resources as you have to build up that offensive line. You have at least 3 spots on that offensive line that needs bigging up. You have your left guard, you have your right guard, you have your right tackle. And I named those 3 because while Sam Cosmi is around, you don't know where he's going to fit. Like you've been using him at right tackle and right guard. Like I don't even know what the plan is with Sam Cosmi anymore. Like that doesn't make sense to me. Yeah, he don't know nothing. And then you have Chris Paul, who I can't wait to look at the film and see how he played in his first game. I'm not going to sit here and tell you how good or how bad he played. I don't know that yet. But Chris Paul, he's an answer that you're going to look into in the offseason and say, can he start for me? And then you have obviously Trey Turner, who shouldn't be back, and neither should Andrew Norwell be back. That was a failure. George Carmi talked to George. I said your whole name. I don't know why I said it. George talked about it this entire
George Carmi.
Yeah, the very beginning of the show, you talked about this offensive line, and then you have center, who is the possible. Chase Rouillet has been gone for 2 years.
Next year, Mo?
Huh?
Who plays center on this team next year?
That's where we at. Chase Rouillet is around, but he's on his the last year of his deal, and he's missed the last 2 years. So that's like when you think about all these things in terms of trying to bring in a quarterback, it has to be something that's financially responsible, but also like reasonable for your team. Can I get a rookie and not trade up? Okay, let's go that route if we want to do it. Or can I go with Sam Howell, draft a rookie, have him back up or do something, or maybe even draft or sign a veteran that's not going to impede on Sam Howell's ability to develop as a starter. That way I can continue building up this offensive line and don't have that time where it takes years and years to build it up. We can be like Cincy. and Cincy gets all of their significant pieces addressed in one offseason because they had the resources to do it while Joe Burrow was still under contract, under his rookie contract. Like, it's ways to get this done. I ain't trading for no top 2 pick, and I'm not trading for a high price veteran.
I agree.
Michael talks about free agents here, so we'll get to a little bit. We were talking about the line. I looked at the list today, George. I think you saw it in the group chat. They put up tackles and guards. There weren't any that leaped off the page to me that got me real excited. That is, I will say that. I mean, the Bengals kind of lucked out that year, and there were some options. Now, there's always some guys that get cut loose. I mean, Leno was a surprise cut when we got him. Love Leno. He took a step back this year.
Put it this way, 2 things. I agree with you in that he did, and also I have to say this because there are people who hounded me day after day after the bye week at that, who would try to convince me that Leno is some trash player. Leno's not playing. He's not a trash player. He's not a bad player. He's one of your more consistent players, and he's going up against top end talent every single week. So he's not going to look good. And when you have, not going to look great, but when you have a solid player on that side, who's solid, he's one of the best pass protectors in the NFL at tackle. That is a fact. But when he's overall a solid player, and you're going up against good or great guys, you're going to have some of those issues. And if he's your weakest link moving forward in the offensive line, that's not a bad thing. If he's your strongest link, if he's your strongest player, your best player, that is a problem. You don't want him as your best offensive lineman, and that's what's been going on recently. He's been your best offensive lineman. But to the point, one thing, my bad, the all season of last year, they could have got James Daniels, and that's what I wanted to say. James Daniels is the right guard who went to Pittsburgh. Yep. And the only reason why I know that is because I had to look at him in the offseason for my own scouting work. Like I had to look at him. So I knew who James Daniels was, and it's going to be interesting to see like who else is going to be out there this offseason. But he was one guy where I'm like, look, you let go of Brandon Sheriff. He is the guy who's 25 years old. You can bring him in here, and he will do wonders for this offensive line. He went to Pittsburgh doing just fine right now. I think he's like a top 10 guy in Pro Football Focus.
James Daniels is one of those guys, a big fan of his when he came out. And part of that, what we're dealing with this year is coaching arrogance is what I call it. I mean, they just assumed that they could go do whatever they felt like, and Masco would make it happen. I have never in my life seen, I've said this several times on different episodes here, I've never seen a right tackle just get interchanged back and forth. Starting right tackle, not for injury purposes, not for getting them back in shape like maybe the first couple of days, but just because they had no plan. That's all I can come up with. They had no plan. They replaced the 2 guards. Poor Leno, him and Flowers played so great together last year, and I think there's something to that. The man standing next to you is extremely important. So to your point about Leno, I wasn't trying to trash him. It was not as good this year as it was the year before. I'll say this, though. He posted every game this year, which for that particular line was incredible. Let's move on. The fan base is certain that Scott Turner will be fired in 2 weeks. I think I will be surprised if Turner gets fired. And I only say that like listen, if the brand new owner was in right this very minute, everybody gets fired. If Snyder was keeping the team, I wonder if everybody doesn't get fired. I mean, again, you talk about no winning seasons that in 3 years, that usually gets you fired. But because of everything that's changing, I find it hard to believe there'll be any change at all, which I guess sounds odd. But I think Turner's back because really, who's coming for 1 year? I don't think there's anything they can do next year. I'd be surprised even if they went out and had some great year next year that you bring Ron Rivera back. It's just not generally how things happen when a new owner comes in and you're assuming that he brings in his own, president of football ops, which Ron is right now, your own GM, which essentially Ron is right now, who hires a head coach, who Ron is right now. So while that's part of the problem also, right? I mean, you can't get rid of Ron because he's got so much power in the organization. I think we'd like to see Scott Turner gone. I wouldn't mind it. I was always a big fan of Scott. But again, we're in a business where production is important. Wins are important. The offense hasn't been good enough. Maul, where do you turn with the offense?
I think so. First off, I don't know if moving on from Scott is the best idea either. Like I have my personal preference. And my personal preference is, look, at the end of the day, knowing who Ron is, he's going to hire a retread anyway, who's somebody familiar with him. And if that means you're going to bring in a guy for one season to help get accomplished what you want to get accomplished, all right, cool, do what you got to do. I don't think that, I think he's a good coach, but I don't think he's good enough to really put these guys over the hump. So do what you got to do, Ron, and make yourself comfortable. Like, because we know what's going to happen. I think I know what's going to happen. And Scott,
tell us what you think is going to happen.
I think that I really think that Ron is going to get whoever it comes in from ownership standpoint. I think Ron is going to be on his last season in 2023. I think whatever is in here with them, because this has been so congested in terms of like everything that's surrounding Ron, in terms of like from a macro standpoint, everything's been so congested because everything has to go through Ron, but then there's so many different layers that goes through Ron, and then there's some that Ron actually talks to and consults with, and all these things, obviously, aka coach-centric environment. But I think that everybody ends up getting the axe ultimately this season whenever there is an ownership update. But ultimately, that's only but so much, that these guys can do. I mean, the only way that really saves Ron is if like Sam Howell happens to be that guy, or whichever quarterback that they bring in, and the offense is all of a sudden putting butts in the seats. Like, that's the only way that you can really sit here and reevaluate the decision to move on from Ron Rivera, because you can't escape 3 straight seasons where you're at least 2-4 or worse, or 1-4 or worse. You can't escape the fact that your team in 3 straight seasons has faltered down the stretch. This year being one of the worst situations because you weren't chasing a playoff spot. You were in position to make the playoffs. You were in the 6th seed, and then you find a way to go 0-4 in like 4 games out of the bye week, or right before the bye week, or something like that. So like, there is nothing that he can really do to escape that. And if an owner does their due diligence and understanding, where or who Ron is as a coach and what he has brought to this team, and nevertheless, some of the things that he says, like, there is like hardly any accountability, in my opinion, from Ron Rivera, and it's frustrating from several people. I don't even understand how he even has I don't know what degree his support system is, but it has to be small. Let's put it that way, from the fan base. So that's the sad thing. But I guess the last thing I'll say on the offensive coordinator spot, and just offense in general, it's hard to really run it back with Scott Turner. While they may do it, but it's hard to really run it back just in terms of like a long-term viewpoint when you sit here and understand the report that came out recently, and that there's at least 9 commanders who's gone anonymously on the record to a reporter telling them how dysfunctional this offense is, and the reasons why Scott Turner lays majority of the blame. It's hard to turn around from that. It's hard to turn around from the fact that you had your opportunities in one of your biggest games, Sunday Night Football. You take the game plan, ball it up, shoot that in the trash can like it's a jump shot, and say, I'm going to just do my own thing. Y'all better follow suit. Like, back me up with what I got going on. Execute. I don't care what we got going on. I don't care what's working. B-Rob averaging 7 yards to carry. Congratulations. Let me show you what I got going on. Like, all these things where he hijacked some big moments in order to call some things that just did not marry in the offense that they were trying to get established in this win streak. That is a fireable offense within itself. Just understanding how many times you had to ask yourself, why did Scott Turner do X, Y, Z?
George, are we overthinking this thing? Like, what is the chance that a new owner comes in, and yes, some of the early work will have been done in free agency, but any GM that he hires, I mean, these guys watch football just like all the rest of us do, and these guys are scouts, and they're on the road and grinding hard. I mean, Martin Mayhew is out on the road right now scouting players. I mean, it's what these guys do. So maybe we're overthinking this. Maybe the owner can come in this year and say, here we go. Everybody's out. Everybody that I'm bringing in with me keeps up with it, all year long, and they have their own scouting agencies and all these different things. are we overthinking the idea that Ron and company have to be back for another year? And particularly if we admit that that's a lame duck year and that we're not expecting much, then maybe you do just blow it all up right now and start over right this second. And at least that way, whoever comes in gets their fingerprints on Sam Howell before this group gets another year with him. What do you think about that option, that maybe we're overthinking this thing?
I think it's twofold. And I think I don't think we're overthinking it, right? I think they're going to be caught up in a weird dynamic, right? The NFL draft is in April. They're doing all this hard scouting. They're doing all this hard drafting. They're putting things in order. And I just think that, like, in regard to hitting a hard reset and basically having a new GM and kind of doing all that within a month or within a couple of weeks of the next draft is going to be the hardest thing to do. The reason why I think that is just in general, like, I'm trying to think about this.
What if they fired everybody but the two Martys?
That's true. I mean, that's a good perspective there. Like, they could potentially go that route, but like what I was trying to get at is they have to figure out, like, right now, I mean, we're going to hear the owners in late March, right? March 26th, the NFL owners meeting where they have the voting process to actually appoint the new owner, right? Right now, people aren't talking about it. They're still vetting the candidates, right? The people that are trying to become the owner of the team, but they have to look into their liquid assets and how much money they have, and could they potentially, afford the team? Could they, is the money transferable? Is it tied up in stocks? They're doing all that right now. So they don't, like, I feel like they have a couple like finalists who wants to be, we know that people are pitching in an offer, but they're going through that right now. And I think it just takes a while. And this is me being all hypothetical, but also, it's an old boys club. It's a nonprofit, actually. People kind of neglect that the NFL, they want the owners to basically have a kind of squeaky image as well. I'm sure there's criminal backgrounds on these people and, asset backgrounds, business backgrounds as well. So they are doing things in that regard. So I think the ownership's going to be slower than we think it's going to be. I don't think there's going to be a hard reset going into next year. But going back to our original comment, I do think that there's going to be a jump start to the coaching staff. I do think Scott Turner will get removed. I think he's going to be the sacrificial lamb because they have to do something because, averaging 20 points a game, averaging less than that, like 18, 17 points a game, something like that, right? It's pretty low. So you can't go, you can't sell it to the fan base. And I think that's going to have a domino effect. Let's say you get rid of Scott Turner, the new OC is going to want to have, a different offensive line coach, different tight end coach, people that kind of he respects kind of bring along. So we'll change our coaching staff. The easier solution, which, Jamal kind of alluded to it, potentially hiring in-house, maybe just putting Ken Zampese from quarterback coach to offensive coordinator, go that route. Mike Shula has some Carolina Panthers ties, could potentially bring him over here as well. I don't like either one of those. I'd rather go outside. And there's some people that I like. Let's say Tom Brady leaves the Buccaneers and Byron Leftwich potentially is, springs loose. You could potentially be like, hey, come in here. You're from DC, be an offensive coordinator for a year. Potentially, if you do well, you can become the head coach a year later, something along the lines of that.
Did the offense get better in Tampa Bay with Leftwich? I know everybody loved Leftwich, and he's from the area, but I mean, Did they get better? I didn't feel like it.
Let me say one more thing, and I'll let Jamal go. I think Jamal is going to jump on it. But like, last thing I want to say is, if Sean McVay leaves, you could potentially pick some of his coaching staff apart too and throw them on our team as well, because there are some good potential there. But sorry, Jamal, I don't know if you want to touch on Leftwich at all or something.
Nah, just OC in general. To answer the question though, Doug, I don't know if his offense regressed or not. I can't call it. Obviously we know that the team didn't look good, but I think that was like they had some issues with their offensive line, and you kind of know how that goes. Given we had to watch 17 games of that over here, but. Offensive coordinator, I was going to say one thing, George, just to add on to the conversation. I think that is one route. That is the one route that I don't know what percent. It's a low probability of happening or low possibility, whatever the word is, of happening. But I think the only way that you can have a shot of like really sustaining something long term if they move on from Scott Turner this offseason is going with that up and coming guy. I don't think like it's going to be hard to get a name like a guy with a prominent name out there that's already offensive coordinator, because teams are just going to decline somebody trying to interview. Like if we want to request that, they're probably just going to decline it. But I think if you can find somebody that's an assistant that, and I'm not sitting here saying that I don't even have a name for you. Like, but if you look at some of the teams that just has good offenses and they have this smart guy. You've been doing your homework on these people, and they have this smart guy that's a Sean McVay, who's a tight ends coach right now, and you're sitting here saying, I like the way he thinks. I like how he's doing things. I like the offense that he comes from. I like the tree. I like the coaching tree. He sounds like he's ready to take the next step. Okay, I'm going to give you this shot this year. Maybe you do end up being good. And at that point, you're in a spot where you're like, this coordinator either saved Ron and he's able to stay here now for X amount of years. He bought some time with the owner, the new owner situation. He bought some time with himself, his fan base, because he got this offensive coordinator in here who can put up points now. He understands what this team can do, and he trusts this coordinator. He lets this coordinator create and develop the way things he sees fit. Or if they continue losing, but the offense is still doing good, they're finding ways to lose, but this offense is looking much better, and this new owner likes this offensive coordinator, he may say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and put you at head coach, and we'll see what this thing looks like with you. You get your guys in here, or maybe the GM, like whatever the GM decides. I don't know how they're going to do things. I'm just shooting this and seeing. Yep, I'm spitballing here. But I think that's one of the ways where you can sit here and say, okay, I like the direction that this team is going. I like this offensive coordinator that they promoted to head coach. Now, granted, it is going to be conversation like, is he ready? If he's an up-and-comer, like, is he ready to be a head coach? But cross that bridge when we get there. Point being, it's very confusing with this ownership situation. I think that's the bottom line.
Long story short,
it's going to be fascinating.
100%, yeah.
Let's end this thing on a positive note. There were some good things. I'll list out a couple. You guys think of some that you may have. Terry McLaurin, another 1,000-yard season with the quarterback carousel. It's incredible. 3 straight years now with 1,000 yards for him. So, golf clap to Terry. 11.5 sacks. We mentioned it for Deron Payne. Golf clap for him. I think Cam Curl was really impressive this year. The secondary may be the best it's been in a long time. Golf clap to Kendall Fuller, who looked great yesterday. He had a really good season, and I really thought he was one of these guys that we were going to need to upgrade from. Mm-hmm. I'm not so sure about that anymore. Danny Johnson looked really good in his playing time. I think there's an upgrade possible there. Yesterday, Percy Butler, Khaleke Hudson looked great. Now, why it's taken Khaleke Hudson so long to look great, I have no idea, but he did yesterday. I think the tight end room deserves a golf clap for this year. I don't think Logan Thomas will be back, but John Bates is criminally underrated. I really liked Amani Rodgers before he got hurt, and we haven't really seen what Cole Turner has, even though I know that the coaching staff likes him real well. What, George, let's start with you. A couple things from this season that you'll remember fondly.
So you definitely touched on a good amount. For one, I want to start off with Brian Robinson, man. So there was a point in the year where we basically we had to rely on him. It was amazing, right? A 3rd-round rookie running back, from Alabama. We know the whole incident happened early in the year, missing 4 games. He approached about like 800 yards. So he had a high amount of yards at the end of the year, and he could easily eclipse 1,000 yards. And I just found it really interesting. I was like, man, like we're with an offense consisting of Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson and all these awesome talented players. The focal point of our offense is Brian Robinson. And he's pounding the ball, and he's actually rising to the occasion. I don't know if maybe that's the most smartest decision considering our wide receivers, but at the same time, he held it down. He did a great job there, so I was proud of him. And then you alluded to our secondary, man. Like Derek Forrest was a revelation. I'm a season ticket holder. I watched the Jaguars game. I'm like I have this big game James. He's a Cowboys content creator. He's from Ohio. He's like, yo, check out Derek Forrest. He's in the rides. I'm telling you. I'm like, all right, cool. And we knew about him on the team, but he's hitting. He's bringing a physical influence on the back end. He's getting turnovers, and between him and Curl, we're starting to have that secondary that's been lacking for a long time. So I think our defense is actually pretty legitimate. It's young. I like our young core, and I like the fact that Brian Robinson is rising to the occasion, and Jahan Dotson too. I'll finish on that. I don't want to steal all of them, but the Jahan Dotson being he was kind of I wouldn't say controversial pick, but there were so many wide receivers. Kind of pick your flavor in that first round. I was like, who do you want? Olave, Wilson, Jameson Williams. I know, Jamal Drake London as well. There's a whole bunch of people that were out there, but Dotson, he held it down, dude. I think, obviously Garrett Wilson he's the one. I love Garrett Wilson. He's my favorite of them all. But I think the trade back, and because of the trade back, we got Dotson and Robinson and Howell. Collectively, it's a better deal than just giving one wide receiver. So altogether, that's a positive that I see.
Jahan had that speed on full display yesterday too. His route running was
somebody was awesome. It was good.
Yeah. Well, George said he ain't gonna take every answer, but
My bad, Jamal.
you definitely did, buddy. It's like, nah, let me stop. No, but if you think about it, it's not. How do I even? I think if I talk about things that I remember for 2022, I think the stretch where the defense did find themselves, and ultimately became, I think, the third best defense in the NFL or fourth best defense in the NFL. But the way they found themselves, and I work backwards. I'll start with this past Sunday, forcing 10 3-and-outs against the Dallas Cowboys, and 11 essentially with the interception, the pick six that went to Kendall Fuller was on third down too. So like the way that you shut down that Dallas Cowboys offense it was impressive. Obviously, Dak Prescott was terrible, so he helped you out. And they thought that Noah Brown was Megatron, giving him 1,000 pass attempts in double coverage and stuff like that. That was weird. But the defense and how they performed throughout the course of the season when they found themselves, and obviously that was a Cam Curl deal, and obviously that was a situation where you didn't know how you were going to put Benjamin St. Juste on the field until William Jackson III got hurt and he wasn't able to play. And then you find out that you can move Benjamin St. Juste around in your defense just as much as you can move around Cam Curl, Bobby McCain, and Derek Forrest. All these guys are interchangeable, and Jack Del Rio had fun understanding like what he can do with these safety groups. And I think that's the strongest unit of that secondary, is understanding that these safeties are key to moving forward, and seeing how important they are, especially with Cam Curl being out, was really big. Obviously the defensive line was one thing, but just that defense really taking over and winning games for this team. Think about it, George. You mentioned this when we were talking about the offense. You're averaging 18 points a game throughout the season. And then at one point before it got to that number, I think it was a stretch, maybe going into the Colts game, if not after the Colts game, where they were like around 16 points per game, or maybe 7, or maybe like 15 points per. No, it was 12. I think it was 12 or 13. Like either way, after the Lions game, they were really low, like around 13, 14 points a game offensively. Like you can't win with that. Yet somehow the defense was good enough and even better to overcome that points per game on the offensive side of the football during that stretch. So that was like one of the bright spots throughout the entire course of the season, is seeing the defense find themselves, seeing the players understand and develop, and seeing Jamin Davis on the second level become a player that you can really rely on and be confident in.
Like, that was huge.
That was huge. It really was. Like the nature and the course of this defense really hinges on the fact that Jamin Davis has to develop, and you were able to keep him out there in certain packages that benefited this defense, meaning like that single package with the 5 defensive linemen. You can now keep Jamin Davis out there or Cole Holcomb. And when Cole got hurt, you could keep Jamin out there along with Cam Curl, who's your Buffalo nickel guy, and move things like that. And his development was big. And last thing I'll touch on is Jahan Dotson. It's unfortunate that he got hurt and missed, I think, 4 games. But understanding the type of player he is, like he's his maturity level coming into the league as a rookie, the way in which it was outstanding. His knowledge of route running, his knowledge of how to stem defenders, his knowledge of how to manipulate defenders' hips, and understanding the leverage that he has, and becoming a receiver who is already a threat in the game because of what he knows coming into the NFL, is something that people, I'm not going to sit here and say didn't account for, but I think from a fan base standpoint, a Commanders community, reporters, and fans alike, and even commentators, that's something that probably took a lot of people by surprise, is how effective he can be in the game, and in turn how effective he can even be in the red zone. You got a 5'10" guy who was your best red zone threat, and that's not a knock, but it's like, think of how good you have to be that short in stature compared to like 6'5" guys in Cole Turner, 6'5" guys in Cam Sims, and then you have Terry out there as well. Jahan is your best guy in the red zone. Like, that's crazy good to see. And it's promising, man, because you can use him in situational football and you can find ways to get him the ball. And I can't wait till this is the day where there's a coordinator who understands that you have chess pieces on your team. So long as you find a way to deliberately dial up a play to get them the football, that is promising. And I love the fact that Jahan Dotson on this team.
Follow up on your comments about the defense, Mo. They were 3rd in yards allowed, for whatever that's worth. I think 12th in DVOA. And for longtime Commanders fans, this will be incredible. They were the best 3rd down defense in the league, and by a pretty good margin too, like 2 or 3 percentage points, which when you come down to it is pretty huge.
Yeah, significant.
I mean, how many years have we just been killed by the 3rd down defense? So to have the defense being able to play that way, and that's why I think Payne's so important, because that's what a lot of that is because of the ability to only rush 4 is a defensive coordinator's dream. Fellas, it was not the season we wanted. It's the season we got, and it was fun being able to spend it with guys like you. So I appreciate both of you, and appreciate both of y'all coming on today.
Anytime, boss man. I definitely appreciate you. George, nice seeing you again, my man. Be safe.
George
All
Carmi.
that good stuff. George Carmi, absolutely. Full government.
That's funny. Yeah, I appreciate talking to you guys. Thank you for having me on, Doug. Appreciate it.
Thanks, fellas.
All right, peace. All right, thanks, Doug, man. Appreciate